All right, we'll give everyone just a couple more seconds on the poll, and we're ready to get started. So welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining today's event, Compliance is Not Enough, Empowering Youth to Grow Out of Offending. My name is Allison Friedman, and I'm with OJJDP's NTTAC. This webinar is brought to you by our colleagues at the Robert F. Kennedy National Resource Center for Juvenile Justice. For best results for the webinar, please close all of your windows while viewing the webinar. If you encounter any other issues, you can try opening the webinar in a different browser, Google Chrome or Firefox, for example. If you have any questions during the session, you can use that chat tool to send us a message. We will be having closed captioning as well during the webinar if anybody would like to view that. And just a reminder that this event is being recorded and will be archived on OJJDP's multimedia page. You can go to OJJDP's multimedia page to view webinars on juvenile justice and child victimization prevention. If you would like to get access to any supporting materials for these archived webinars, you may do so by contacting the OJJDP TTA Help Desk at OJJDP@usdoj.gov. As I said, that the materials for, sorry, the poll was just closing. There we go. The materials, there we go. Sorry about that. The materials for the webinar can be downloaded using the file transfer function. You select the file that you want, and then you click download. If you're having any trouble with that, my colleague Joyce added a link to the Google Drive in the chat, and the files are there as well. And for optimal audio, we are asking you to have the WebEx system dial your phone. If you're connected to, it will show a little headset next to your name. If you have any technical issues, you can feel free to contact OJJDP TTA, the help desk at OJJDP@usdoj.gov. And during today's web event, we'll be taking questions, and we ask the participants please submit their questions in the chat box. When you're submitting your questions, please make sure you select everyone and then hit enter or select the send button. Now, please help us count. If you are viewing today's webinar by yourself, there is no need to type anything at this time. But if you're viewing in a group, meaning there's more than one individual with you, not including yourself, please type in the total number of additional people in the room. So for example, if it's you and one colleague, then you would type 1. And please, again, send it to everyone if you are viewing with anyone else. And please note that you will all be receiving a certificate of attendance within 24 hours via an automated email from OJJDP's NTTAC with a certificate of attendance. So please keep an eye on your email for your certificates. And this is the agenda for today's webinar, and I'm going to turn it over to our host, John Toole from the RFK National Resource Center.
Thank you, Allison. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Compliance is Not Enough, Empowering Youth to Grow Out of Offending webinar. My name is John Toole. I'm the Executive Director for the Robert F. Kennedy National Resource Center for Juvenile Justice. Our National Resource Center provides field-based technical assistance through cultivated partnerships with state and local youth serving leaders and practitioners like you. And it's designed to improve child welfare and juvenile justice system performance so that each young person may experience a future free from involvement in either system and realize unlimited positive growth opportunities. Our work in more than 60 jurisdictions since our launch in 2013, including 6 currently in the Dennis M. Mondoro project funded through the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention and the Second Chance Act, is built upon research and ample evidence of results that undeniably supports that what you will learn about today will be critical to our current and future efforts to improve the lives of our nation's young people. During this session, our featured presenter, Jonathan Cloud, author of the innovative growth-focused case management approach, will highlight how the GFCM and the 4 practices for supporting formation of a positive identity can complement risk needs responsivity instruments. As someone who toiled in juvenile probation for nearly 2 decades, I believe the growth-focused case management approach can be integrated into case planning and can provide an empowering, practical, and effective supervision approach. As of my opening comments at this point, there are more than 600 participants joining us today, and nearly 30% of those of you who are joining us had offered pre-session questions. We will obviously not get to all of the inquiries, nor have the chance to engage in an interactive exchange in this particular format. However, I do believe that many of your questions will be addressed within the delivered content. If not, then my hope is that you will make time to learn more by reading the growth-focused case management practice brief, which will be referenced during today's presentation. I do hope that you'll explore the provided handouts to learn even more detail. And I do hope that you demonstrate a curiosity by convening leadership teams in your jurisdictions to explore opportunities for GFCM's use. But finally, attending our 2021 National Symposium in Nashville, Tennessee from September 8th to 10th, where Mr. Cloud will be facilitating a dynamic half-day training institute on the 10th and diving deeper into GFCM's practical application and impact. There are comprehensive bios available for our presenters today, but let me briefly tell you a little bit about them. Our featured presenter today is Jonathan Cloud. He has provided 40 years of distinguished human services experience and consultation at local, state, and federal levels. This means, by my count, that Jonathan must have started his career when he was approximately 10 years old. I had the privilege of learning of Jonathan's passion and tremendous expertise and insights when we worked together during my tenure at OJJDP. Jonathan is unparalleled in his ability to effectively translate the research and evidence into the design of practical solutions, and then with commensurate proficiency and alacrity, coach, mentor, and teach the requisite skills to policymakers, managers, supervisors, and our day in and day out legion of devoted caseworkers. Jonathan developed the growth-focused case management as a strength-based approach to fostering desistance from offending that ultimately protects public safety. In addition to Jonathan, you will hear from Bob Birmingham, who's devoted more than 30 years to serving the families, youth, and communities in Fairfax County, Virginia. He has tirelessly demonstrated extraordinary commitment and passion for our youth, and he now serves as a consultant to our National Resource Center and fortunately brings that knowledge and passion to jurisdictions across the country. For the past 12 years, Bob has served as the director for Virginia's largest court service unit and led that unit through a wide range of transformative youth justice changes. His perspective on the potential impact of GFCM today is eagerly anticipated. Melissa Graham is a section manager for the Division of Youth and Family Services in Milwaukee County. Melissa has supported the training, implementation, and direct impact of the GFCM in Milwaukee and will be sharing those experiences today. Having worked directly with Melissa and her colleagues in Milwaukee County for over 4 years, she has been instrumental as a part of a team dedicated to broad-ranging, positive change on behalf of Milwaukee's youth and families in a challenging environment. I want to offer my thanks to the National Training and Technical Assistance Center for helping us host this event today. And I want to offer a special thank you to Julia Allanen, our OJJDP Dennis Mondoro project manager, for her special efforts in making this event a reality, the project forward-thinking and forward-achieving. And I want to thank you for taking your valuable time to join us this afternoon. Now I'm thrilled to welcome Jonathan Cloud.
Great. Thanks a lot, John. Really, really appreciate it. And I would imagine that all of you listening in must suspect that John and I know each other because he really tossed in a nice, well-received little compliment. No, I didn't start when I was 10, but I guess that's saying I'm hanging in there. I'm looking pretty good so far. John and I go back a ways. It is fantastic to experience this session with him and for him to be leading the way. I had to report to him back in the days when I was doing quite a bit of consulting around the country for the U.S. Department of Justice, OJJDP. So, John, appreciate the intro. Thanks so much for your work. It's appropriate that John introduced this piece because RFK National Resource Center did some fantastic work, in my opinion, in Milwaukee County, the Division of Youth and Family Services. We'll be talking about them. Did some great work in helping them get to a state of readiness for what you're about to hear today. It's simple, yet challenging. And I'm going to try to keep it simple for you, but it's challenging because it forces us to rethink how we think and to shift how we practice. So we'll be getting inside of that, but what they were able to do through their probation review process was just fantastic, and identified a number of things that opened the door, and I think in some respects led to the leadership there reaching out to me and bringing me in to begin getting to work on building a solid case management approach. They were already of the mindset that they needed to do more than just control youth and find punitive responses, but needed a way to translate that into practice. And what you'll be hearing today covers some of that. So I guess in relation to John, I should also tip my hat off to the leadership in Milwaukee County Division of Youth and Family Services. Thank you for your work and for leading the way. Mark Mertens is their administrator, and there are two deputy administrators have been key as well. Deshelle Parker and Kelly Pethke have all worked together to make it clear that this isn't going away. And I would say to you that as you're listening to this, that kind of leadership is vital, because it's not an easy shift to make, but it's exciting to see some of the results we're beginning to see. So let's get into it. Do take John up on the resources that are provided to you. This is just going to be an intro to it. I'm glad he mentioned the deep dive at the Institute, because I was tempted to do a deep dive today, but this is a limited format. So I'm gonna kind of scan across the top, but you can download the PowerPoint. And if you do, go to the notes page, notes view page, and in that you will get some extensive explanatory notes about this content. And I did that for you. So go get it, download it, look at it. And that allows me to just hit the high points with you today. And then you can follow up and look at that material. Also in the material that comes with this is, for lack of a better expression, a miniature little practice guide that actually gives you some practical tips on the 4 practices, the 4 strategies that supports growth and does it in a way that allows compliance to be a part of how they grow up. I'm going to say that again, because that's the tricky mixture. I got to do stuff according to the court and my worker, but doing it needs to support me growing up, maturing out of delinquency. One of my favorite research articles, by the way, that's the exact title, Maturing Out of Delinquency, such that I become a person for whom offending is no longer even compatible. Very exciting. So feel free to download that tool. It's got some nice little tips in there to help you. And that comes to you courtesy of Milwaukee County, because I developed it for them, did some tweaks on it, but happy to share that material with you. All right, well, let's get going on this. I'm going to leave some chunk of time for questions and answers. I'll be rolling through this, a little bit of theoretical stuff up front, not a whole lot. But then we'll shift over to really getting into some practical things and giving you some highlights about things I've seen in Milwaukee County, as well as hearing from Bob and Melissa. And hopefully at the end of this time, you'll have a good sense of sort of what this is, and you're able then to move forward on it. Here's what we're going to be covering in our quick scan. Most youth grow out of offending and some don't. And we're going to start with a mental activity in just a second. No big deal. And if you're near some paper and a pen, you might want to grab that too, because you can jot these 4 little bullet points down. Incredibly simple, but the 4 practices are things that every single one of you have experienced. And the 4 things that you all have experienced define the 4 phases of the growth-focused case management model. You know, it's that simple. So I don't want you to forget those 4 things. And everything else we talk about today is going to come back to those 4 things. So we're going to do a quick mental activity. You're going to jot down those 4 things if you need to, in order to remember it, to understand why you didn't keep on offending. But some youth do. And it's because of the same 4 key practices, the same 4 key points. And then we're going to talk about the desistance perspective, and all that means is you grow out of it. You move beyond it. You and I don't have to wake up in the morning and worry about not beating somebody up or stealing somebody or making sure we don't get caught doing something illegal. Well, most of us don't. I hope none of us do, right? Right. Well, look, we don't have to do that, because it's going into somebody's house and taking something is not even compatible with who we are. In other words, we're past that. Growth-focused case management is about getting a young person to that. And guess what? It's doable. We got the research for it. Can't wait to share it with you. All right. Now, there's 2 kinds of compliance to go with that. We're going to talk a little bit about that, what they want to do, what we want them to do. And we've got this little tension that's always kind of going with how can we like incentivize them to do what they're supposed to do. We're going to get inside of that, and then go to the kind of compliance that this is really about. And that is they comply because by complying, I get to become who I am. Incredibly exciting. So that in that last bullet, we'll get into the framework and the model, and then that's when I'll hand it off to Bob and Melissa. But hopefully already you've got this sense that, okay, so this thing about compliance isn't enough isn't throwing compliance out the window. Nope. You got to comply. What we're throwing out the window is the typical definition of what compliance is. And typically it's, you did what you were supposed to do. All right? You call in by 8 p.m. every evening. Did you do it? Good. Bow. Check that off. All right? You didn't hang out with some delinquent peers. You do it? Boom, boom. Check that off. All right? You attended school. You do it? Boom. Bow. Check that off. That's a typical approach. Did you do it? Okay. Now, here's the shift we're going to make today. Yeah, you still need to call in at 8 p.m., check in with your probation officer. Yeah, you need to stay away from those delinquent peers. Yeah, you need to leave those drugs alone. But the shift we're going to make is how you go about complying. Why are you doing it? Are you doing it so you get off probation? Or are you doing it because you now know that those are the steps necessary to take in order to become who I want to become? Now, that's not theoretical. As you look at these learning objectives, guess what happened last week? Doing some work with one for quality assurance division or unit in Milwaukee County, and we're doing a thing that we call the Blitz, because we want to like give booster sessions to all the, we call them HSWs, human service workers, same as your probation officers. So we wanted to give sessions to those. And as we're doing this, we're hearing some wonderful stories, and we sat there, and one of the HSWs said, well, you know, I'm really excited. Now watch what she was excited about, because in most youth justice systems, you don't get excited about this, right? I'm excited because the youth I'm working with has finally figured out that he really, really, really wants to become a dog breeder. Now, I hope you're chuckling a little bit. Dog breeder? I mean, come on. You're in here for shoplifting and all this stuff, and you're talking about dog breeding. Let me tell you why that matters. That matters because there's a piece of research, and a lot of research, right, that says this. If that youth's image of the kind of dog breeder she will be several years from now is super, super vivid, she's less likely to offend. In fact, the title of the research article is Vividness of Future Self Predicts Delinquency. I just want to let that soak in for a second. Vividness, right, of future self predicts delinquency. The clearer I see my future identity, the less likely I am to offend. The rest of our time today is about how you take that. And we do that in what we call the first phase of our work. How we take that and we say, now, if you want to move towards that, you got to check in with me every evening, because we got to do that to make you stay on, help you stay on track, right? Your delinquent peers, it's not going to get you to becoming a dog breeder. We've got you a mentor set up. We got an internship set up for you to go look at how dogs are being breeded and all this good stuff, right? So these are the things you must do. There we go, compliance, in order for you to become a dog breeder one day. In other words, I can't work with a youth like this if I don't work with the youth. If I don't have a conversation, forget about it. If I'm just sitting in my office throwing action steps together, or I'm throwing a list of services together, that ain't a great case plan, because it ain't about me and who I want to become. So these are our learning objectives to make what I just shared with you clear. And by the way, that was just one of the ideal selves that they were sharing. I mean, I challenged one of our supervisors. I said, you should go back to your unit and put a poster on the wall and just like list all the ideal selves we heard from youth this past month or so. Incredible, incredible. Why? Because having an ideal self, a person you want to become, your future identity, right, has empirical evidence that it lessens the likelihood of reoffending. It's right and good for a youth justice agency to be in the business of helping a young person figure out how to become an incredible future citizen. Not just stop offending, but just follow who you are to become. Now, so here are our learning objectives, and then we're going to do our little mental activity, and then we're going to hit a few high points, and we'll be there. All right, so for that to make sense, here's what I want you to get. I want you to get what I've already hit a couple of times, right? The strong empirical relationship between identity and delinquency, and forming my identity. And we'll get inside of what identity is, because you know what? I didn't have a clear understanding of it about 2.5 years ago when I started with Milwaukee County. So you're okay. All right. When I presented it to them, I realized it wasn't getting traction, and they gave me great feedback. I worked closely with folks there. I went back in the research, and I'm going to share with you a slide that tells you what an identity is. How cool is that? And you know why that's cool? Because forming an identity is the core developmental task of adolescence. So if we don't even know what identity is and how it's formed, how are we going to help adolescents? Oh, and by the way, offending has a heck of a lot to do with having difficulty with forming that identity. I got a pile of research articles on that one. So I want you to understand that connection, right? And then understand what I just shared with you about the dog breeder. Why seeing who they can become is so incredibly important. Then to understand that you've got to involve them in the case planning process to do this. And then to understand the 4 strategies. If you're using risk instruments in your work, and your risk needs responsivity fits in beautifully. Because now here's what they're saying in Milwaukee County after they finish their risk assessment and identify their criminogenic risks. Guess what they say now? Now they say, oh, we've just identified the barriers, the things that are getting in the way of this youth becoming a dog breeder one day. You're still doing your risk assessment, folks. You're still using your R&R instruments and strategies. But now you're doing it in a developmentally informed way. I'm not going to look at my youth and say, you got some criminogenic risks here. And I know you, well, I hope you all don't say criminogenic anything to them. I hope you don't say you got some issues. I hope you just say, love this dog breeder thing you want to do. Now let's find out what's getting in the way of that. And this assessment we just did with you, it's going to tell us exactly what we need to work on. Now, you've just gotten pretty much the whole thing right here in this little nutshell right up front. And I'm sure there are a number of folks on who have seen me train before, and that's kind of how I do it. I kind of put it in a package up front, and then I go about unpacking that. So let's do that. All right, here comes your mental activity. I need you to do something. There's no way for me to check, so you can blow me off if you want, but please don't. All right, if you got a piece of paper, you can have that in front of you to jot down 4 things in just a second. All I want you to do in this 15-second mental activity, think about your teen years. Okay, you there? Lock in. Teen years. You were a teenager. Locked in. Okay, great. Got your teen years. Next, I want you to think about, no, you don't have to share this with anybody ever, because I'm not sharing mine, but think about something you got involved in that was delinquent, you know, and maybe you just didn't get caught, or maybe you did and it didn't get too out of hand. Or if you're a really good teenager and you didn't do anything delinquent, maybe just some serious misbehavior. Okay, I'll let you slide. Just some serious misbehavior. In fact, the whole continuum that we did back when John and I were doing the comprehensive strategy for serious violent chronic offenders talked about that continuum, and it begins with some problem behaviors, non-criminal misbehaviors. Okay, so so if you don't have any delinquency stuff, just maybe some behaviors. Just pick out one little episode that was just a little bit off, had no business. Or as my grandmother used to say, boy, you know better. Just one of those things. Okay, you got it? Now, here we go. I'm going to give you the 4 things that came into play that was behind that behavior, and how the same 4 things that were behind that behavior are the 4 things that got you out of it so that you did not become stuck, right? And that's what this age crime curve is all about. There's this steep upshot in offending, and we know from the research, this is well established, that then it starts to go back the other way. And they found that most youth will actually just kind of grow out of offending. That's why all the great work you all are doing out there around diversion, fantastic. In Milwaukee County, they have a unit, right, whose job handles, in one of its things, is specifically designed to handle low-risk youth. They make it a specialty to zero in on the ones who they're doing okay. If we don't intervene too much, we don't get in there and start jerking them around, right, and just start supporting them, right, they're going to move towards like growing out of delinquency. And then there's some who are not. So why is that? Okay, here we go. What was behind your behavior? We are good in our system at identifying behavior. Our juvenile codes list them, right? We know, right? So, but what's underlying it? What's behind the behavior? And the work I've done for the state of Wisconsin around that basic intake worker training for all the intake workers in the state, I said we need to learn to interpret the behavior. Not enough just say there it is, but developmentally, what's going on? Because if all I want to do is try to extinguish the behavior, I'm going to make my compliance based purely on, I don't want to see that again. And you know how successful that is. Or you know how easily that creates those technical violations that then sucks youth deeper and deeper and deeper into the system. Let's go underneath. 4 things are underway. And by the way, these were the 4 things that are underway in your little episode that you're thinking about right now. So if you do have a pen or paper, here's the 4 things I want you to jot down. And yes, they correlate with our growth-focused case management framework. The framework is based on how development works. The framework, when I was designing it, I asked myself 2 questions. How does development work, and how do we cooperate with it? Those were my 2 driving questions when I went to work developing this. How does development work? And how do we cooperate with it? Because development knows what it's doing, right? We just mess it up. So how do we cooperate with it? Here are the 4 things that are going on. By the way, we are born with these 4 things because nature says we need to grow. This is fascinating and beautiful. It's terrible when it gets out of control, but I love working with youth because I understand these things right here. We are born with these neural pathways. And I won't get into that. That's the brain thing. That's way too much today. But we have specific neural systems that drive us through these four things. When you got into trouble, let's just say you got into trouble, one or more of these four things were going on. Number one, you were out there exploring. Or as my mom used to say, getting into stuff. Where I grew up, you know, cruising was cool. We get in the car and just go like, where you guys go? I don't know. We're just going out. Doing what? I don't know. Just going out. We're just going to hang out. That's exploring. We have a neural pathway that says you got to do that if you want to grow up. It just needs the right focus. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. All right, exploring, right? So write that word down. You were exploring, but you know what? You weren't exploring in a healthy way. The key word there is what you see in the heading, regulation. It's gotta be regulated. I hope you're starting to see where we're going with this, right? Because if we start helping them learn to regulate what their brains are already doing, right? Okay, getting ahead of myself. I get excited about this stuff. All right, exploring, number one. What's the second thing? Well, you're also discovering stuff. Okay, that's when it gets a little scary now. All right, now this can happen positively or negatively. Positively or negatively, right? So there's no slide for these four things I'm giving you, but I'm going to get to them later. These are four things I'm sharing with you. I just saw someone pop up. I don't see the slide with the four things. These are four things I'm giving you, and I'm making it your mental activity so that you can either jot it down or try to remember it. But we'll be coming back to them on a slide later on when I present the framework. So don't know whose name that was that popped up, but I've got a slide that's got these four on them. Right now, just track with me. I just really want you just to feel and see. Just think through, this is what's underlying the behaviors, right? I'm exploring and it's a little bit out of hand. Secondly, I'm discovering. Think about drug use. Well, you discover drugs, you discover this, you discover that. So you're discovering. There's a neural pathway that says we have to discover stuff. The third is planning. That's what's underlying the behavior. Planning on how to do something about what you've been exploring and discovering, right? Right. Or scheming, right? Scheming on how you're going to do this like keg party without your parents knowing about it, you know. So you're planning stuff, you're doing that, and no business doing, right? And then the fourth thing is actually doing it. Just really want you to let it. It's so simple, piles of research behind it. So I'm going to park here just a little bit longer, and then we're going to rattle through some stuff here. We're about 15 or 20 minutes out on where we'll be landing and wrapping up here. So just want you to track with me and make sure I don't go too fast, right? So how do we understand that behavior? It was really about exploring, discovering stuff, right? Planning on what you're going to do with yourself, and then going out and doing it. That explains behavior at its most simple level and even at its most complex. At its simple level, it's your 4 or 5-year-old who's getting into the cookie jar, exploring around the house. By the way, there's parents in the room, parents are listening. This is why your kids won't stay still. That's why they're always getting into stuff, because there's a thing in the brain that says in order for you to grow, you must explore. I'm going to add something to it in just a second that really puts the lid on it. But the exploration is critical, right? And then they discover, oh, that's where mom keeps the Oreos. I was wondering where those were coming from, all right? And now they're like scheming like crazy on how they're going to get up there, because they know they're not supposed to have those things. They're scheming. They're trying to figure it out. I mean, it's happening at 3 or 4 years old, and then they're in it. They're doing it. So that's all the behaviors you're seeing. These are the neural processes, the things that are underway, right? That's driving that. Right? Here is the key point, however. We have those because they are designed to help us to grow. When we regulate the way we explore, what we discover, how we plan to take action, and then the doing of the actions, we grow. That's what moves us through life. When that is not well regulated and gets out of hand, and we explore in unhealthy ways, discover things we don't need to discover, start planning to do stuff that we shouldn't be doing, right? And then obviously doing it, that's difficult. Growth is about increasing in your capacity to regulate those 4 things. Boom. Growth-focused case management. There it is. Increasing their capacity to regulate. They're exploring, discovering, planning, and doing. One more thing, folks. There is external regulation. That's from the outside. There's those conditions from the court. Okay, I'm cool. And there's internal regulation. Inside me, there's something that's driving me to regulate and control what I explore. Here's what we know. That the higher the level of development or the older you get, the more complex are the developmental tasks. Those 4 things are designed to help us handle our developmental tasks. Exploring, yes, parents. Some folks asked about the role of families. Parents, yeah, now you're getting this insight. Thank you for that comment. Now you're getting insight into what's the role of the family. No, they're not going to help me monitor, right? It's about helping to regulate all of this, right? So nature gives us these 4, I call them 4 motivations. Sometimes I call them developmental drives. I got to explore. I got to discover. I got to plan to do something. Then I got to go do it. I can't stay still. I can't say it's absolutely amazing. It gives us that because we have a series of developmental tasks for growing up that are necessary, right, to reach adulthood. And in order to accomplish those tasks, we need those 4 things that nature gives us automatically. Here's the conundrum. The developmental task that we're concerned about with our youth is called forming an identity. Erik Erikson, he's the one who says that. He gives us about 8 developmental tasks. Erik Erikson says when you hit 12 or 13, up through about 18 or 19, your big task is developing an identity. And now we're also discovering that task continues out into about age 24, 25, which is why we're starting to hear this wonderful thing called emerging adult justice. Thank you. We have finally recognized this is a unique stage of development in which we've got to shift our thinking because a humongous developmental task is underway. And it takes some special strategies to regulate, exploring, discovering, planning, and doing. That's what we are gradually doing more and more effectively in Milwaukee County. That's why the first phase is, let's think about who you want to become. We call our first stage supporting self-exploration. Make sense? Yeah, because now we want to get you regulating your exploring by focusing your exploring on who you can become. Don't just tell me to stop getting high. Please talk to me about this unconscious thing that is at work driving my development. And by the way, it is unconscious, right? It's in a part of the brain. I'm going to use a word, please excuse me, but I got to use it. It's subcortical. The part of the brain that does those 4 things is beneath our awareness. Guess what adolescence is all about? And guess what adulthood is really all about? It's becoming conscious of those 4 things and taking charge of it. That's what it means to grow up and be an adult. I am now in full charge of my exploring, discovering, planning, and doing. And nature gives us a special new part of our brain to do that called the prefrontal cortex, which its unique job is to be able to actually control this and start thinking about long-term in the future. Amazing stage of development. However, if we don't give that stage of development what it needs, oh gosh, it can really get out of hand, can't it? All right, well, this is it. We're at the halfway mark now, a little bit beyond. I think you've got it. Let me just hit this piece right here and then move you forward. Going to hit some highlights on a few other things, but if you've got this, I just want to make sure you do. You've got our growth focused case management model, and how we translate that into practice is an exciting thing that's underway. And I'll highlight a couple of things that folks in Milwaukee County are doing to do exactly that. So this is what's happening in the downward side and the downward slope of the curve. Here is identity. Remember, I promised you I'm going to tell you what an identity is. Well, an identity has 3 parts, right? And last week I had a supervisor shouting back to me. I said, "So, what is identity?" And she clicked on our her mic and said, "Commitment, goals, and roles." You know, I know before long it's going to become a song over at DYFS in Milwaukee County. Commitments, goals, and roles. That's what an identity is. Well, guess what adolescence is about? It is about exploring in a way that gets me to what I want to commit myself to, the goals I want for my life, and the role I'm going to play in my world. And it's about committing to it. There you go. This is right out of the research. There's a guy named James Marcia, by the way, who talks about all this stuff. Fascinating, right? To just focus on the behavior, keep it up. Got to do that. But understand that that doing part was preceded by exploring, discovering, and some planning. And by the way, the exploring, that's exploring and discovering, and then the committing, that's the planning and the doing. In the research, they actually call them exploration processes. Don't you love how researchers make stuff sound so like ugh, confusing? All right, okay. So there you go. Anyway, exploring processes. In the model of growth focused case management, right, it's called self-exploration, and then the second phase we call it self-discovery, right? But those are processes of exploring. And I'm going to share a chart with you shortly that lays out exactly what the HSW or the probation officer is doing in each phase and how it informs the case plan and how the YAZI or your risk instruments support that. Very exciting. And then the committing, same thing, right? All right, got to put some plans together here. Got to get some action steps going, and then you got to go do it. By the way, the doing part of it, you know, after there's commitment, you know the roles you're seeking. That's when you are in the best position for moving out towards community supervision. Imagine moving out to community supervision without any of this stuff in place. All I now have is, I better do it or I'm going to get busted. That's it. Or if I do it, I get this ankle bracelet off. Yay. We're not about that anymore in Milwaukee County. We're about looking at you, as one of their folks put it so beautifully. We're about looking at you beyond the 6 or 9 months of probation. This case plan is your pathway to adulthood. That's the business we're in. And as such, we're not here to control the bad kids. We're here to build Milwaukee County's human capital. They just need a little bit more help around exploring, discovering, planning, and doing in a positive and healthy kind of way. All right, great. I saw a question that said, what kind of tools can we use to help a youth sort of explore? We'll get to some questions a little bit later on. But I will say that one of the things we're doing is really cool that I did with you with your activity is, as we are training our probation officers or our HSWs, we're actually training in a way, and this I give the credit to their quality assurance unit. We're actually training in a way that has them experience their own development. And so the first thing that we are having them do is each worker is developing their own vision board. Imagine that. You're 45 years old, or you're 25, or you're 35, and you're working on a vision board. And I joined in, and I developed a vision board because I have an ideal self. Years, and I am in my early 60s, John. Yes, I've been in it for a while, right? I still have an ideal self. And so I did my little vision board. And so a vision board is one technique that gets used. But the other thing we do with this is I always say to them, this is a framework. I am not in the business of giving you guys another checklist and a long list of do these 4 things to help a youth identify their ideal self. Then we're back to workers working out of compliance yet again. And then the workers are working on compliance and they're making the youth work on compliance. No, be creative. Let me give you another example, and then we'll move on. What in Milwaukee County, they have a special unit called the Youth Assessment Team. They do all the upfront work. Beautiful, right? He said, oh, by the way, guess what I do? Here's what I loved. He wasn't given a checklist and a procedure. He understood what you're listening to right now. And he said, so all I did is added one question to all the questions I'm supposed to ask. I love that, right? Right. I got the compliance list. He said, the question I've added is, okay, young man, okay, young lady, tell me in one word that describes who you are. Beautiful. And he goes, they look at you like, you know what that's doing? That's making them explore. Who am I? I mean, what one word describes me? So there's just two quick examples, yeah? But it's a framework. Don't come to this or don't bring this to your agency if they're looking for a nice thick list of more things to check off to do. This is just a framework to make what you already do more effective. You got to do an assessment. So while you're doing an assessment, make sure you're helping them to discover their strengths as well as their weaknesses. That's all. So you're just going to emphasize that. All right, we'll get there shortly. Beautiful. All right, so let's get ready for the next section here. Desistance perspective on growth. Pretty much laid it out. All a Desistance perspective on growth means is that I grow out of it, that I become a person for whom offending is no longer compatible. And so if you download the practice brief, it shares this illustration with you. If you go to my website, I in fact have all the research supporting all those outer circles there for you. My website is GFCM for Growth Focused Case Management, GFCM-youthjustice.com, dash as in a little hyphen mark, not the word dash. So GFCM-youthjustice.com, and you can get all the research for that. I don't have to talk about this a whole lot, but it just basically says it's worth our time to work on identity. That's all that says. It's worth our time to make sure that the compliance conditions are what the researchers call identity relevant. What does that fancy word mean? It means what you're having me to do, your court conditions are relevant to me becoming a dog breeder one day. If you make that connection for the youth, now we're into what's called identity-based motivation. Beautiful, exciting stuff. I think somebody wanted my website again, my personal website, gfcm-youthjustice.com. All right, and then here is identity confusion. Same thing. Decreases community safety. The research says it. So if your judge says, I don't want anything about this kid's identity, don't talk back. That's not a good idea, but, you might want to explain that, Your Honor, community is safer when kids know what they want to become and we help them move towards that. And we make sure that our conditions are connected to that. Your Honor, be careful. Going back to my days of working on doing that kind of work. Love what you all do. Love how you do it. So here, criminogenic needs. Those are your risk instruments. Criminogenic needs. Now we look at those as the barriers that are getting in the way of forming that identity and exploring and discovering and planning and doing it in a good way. Look at all those circles. All that stuff has to do with difficulties in, right? And the one at the bottom, relationship with parents, my exploration, my discoveries there, the planning I'm doing, it's not all working out there. I'm just not getting connected to them. I don't have, all that stuff well regulated. So let's move towards our conclusion and deal with that conundrum of, why can't I make this kid comply? Right? I've been there, you've been there, we've all been there, right? So in this last 10 minutes, we're going to do that, and then we're going to look at the framework in Milwaukee County. We'll hear from Melissa and Bob, right? Okay, so here's the tension, all right? Here's what you got to do on the left side, but there's all this stuff the kid wants to do. All right, I want to do what I want to do. No. I want you got to do this stuff over here. And the reason we have such a hard time with the right side, because I have a hard time of believing that this should not be unpainful, or that this kid can enjoy desisting from offending. We think that enjoyment or them wanting to do something means it's not right. We're supposed to make it hard on them. Nothing could be further from the truth. Because there's a different kind of enjoyment that is the key to helping our youth understand why it's important to comply. All right. Sorry for the big word, but when I discovered this a while back, it blew my mind. There's really two kinds of enjoyment. No, we don't want the hedonic enjoyment. It's not about happiness. It's not about you just going to keep it up so you can get a, what do you call it? Store card, you know, a gift card. Yay, hey, if you call 5 times this week, we'll give you a gift card. I'm not criticizing that, by the way, you know, but that's the feel good hedonic pleasure. Somehow, you know, throw in enough pleasurable stuff, you know, to make this kid like, okay, you know, hang in there. But there's another kind of pleasure and enjoyment that turns on the exact same neural circuits in the brain, releases the same dopamine and serotonin, right? Which is called eudaimonic pleasure. And that is, I'm using my strengths. I'm growing and I'm becoming, right? I'm moving towards. Does it work? Oh my gosh. It's worked for one youth, because last week we got all excited about a young man, right, who was on probation. He's no longer on probation. He worked with some mentors that partners with Milwaukee County, and now he is starting his own branding company, and he's designed some t-shirts. And the worker told me and the rest of us, now I'm going to be talking to everybody over at DYFS because I want to make sure that we start buying some of those kids' t-shirts, because he's developed t-shirts, right? Yeah, it worked. He's off probation and he had all the requirements, but what probation required of him, he saw as relevant to getting him to his dream of having his own clothing brand. How cool is that? And even if he didn't achieve it, he's going after something. That too is pleasure. That too is enjoyable. If we overlook that and all we do is focus on punitive sanctions, right? Guess what it does? The research says it causes short-sightedness. I can't see my future self anymore, and I can't see what I can become, and I'm just dealing with it now, and that increases delinquency. Okay. As a result, I have, or I tend to have a mindset from that kind of heavy-handed control that's called control orientation. Right? And all control orientation is stuff outside of me is in charge, and look at the results. Self-consciousness, negative affect. But if you can structure in how your conditions help me move toward my ideal self that you heard from me about and that I'm interested in, look at that. That's called an autonomy orientation, or my mindset. I have some autonomy here. I'm moving forward. This is about my future branding business. And look at the effects on functioning. Higher self-esteem, high self-awareness, high levels of ego development, and successful goal attainment. Great. All right. Well, with that in place, let's take a quick look at identity-based motivation. This is what that looks like. It basically says, I want to because I have to. I want to comply because I have to in order to become the person I want to become. That's basically what it means. I will comply. I want to comply because it's going to take me to where I want to go. And so how does Milwaukee County put it all together? So in these last 5 minutes, I'll summarize that one for you. Here is our framework. And hopefully now you can see it's just a framework, right? And it's got life behind it. You know what phase 1 is about? Phase 1 is about exploring. And now we have this thing that, again, this was suggested to me by someone there. And in fact, by Deshelle Parker, when she looked at my materials a few years ago. And she says, Jonathan, the stuff you got here, those are like youth wins. And so now they're called youth wins. You know what our youth wins are? Our youth wins are indicators that a youth is regulating themselves in those 4 areas. In phase 1, you know what the youth win is? The youth can verbally express an ideal self. They can say who they want to become. That's our indicator that self-regulation is underway when it comes to exploring. Our youth win in phase 2 is that the youth can identify their strengths, right? And set goals to address their weaknesses. That's discovering. I've discovered my strengths and my weaknesses, and I wanted to address that stuff. That win is a regulation. I mean, is about regulation. Right? Phase 3, planning, is there. Those are what we refer to as our action steps. Let's figure out how you want to get there, and then monitoring and transitioning is obviously moving forward, putting the services in place. And the youth win in phase 3 is the youth is helping with action steps, and the youth win in phase 4 is the youth is cooperating with services. So I conclude on this one. That's our framework. Look at it in great detail when you download this and have time. As I said, that document I sent you sort of lays all of that out. Won't get inside of trying to explain all of that here in this format. That gets a little crazy, but it shows you, number one, those 4 things we started with that you jotted down. Exploring, discovering, we just use self-efficacy for planning that I'm going to do something. And then last but not least, self-realization. We call that doing. Doing means I'm going there, man. I'm becoming a business owner. I'm developing my t-shirts. That youth who's now probation is in the phase of self-realization. And so again, one more time, exploring, discovering, planning, self-realization. And it shows you over here down the right side how all of that informs the case plan. And Milwaukee County uses the YAZI instrument, right, that helps and assists with all of this. The long-term goal in the YAZI instrument, the Youth Assessment and Screening Instrument, is called the Incentive for Change. So they didn't have to start over. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep using your instruments, right? All right. Just connect your instruments, right, to this framework. Fantastic. All right. Well, that's it. Thank you. I'm done. So I bounce it back to where I'm supposed to bounce it back to. Great.
I'll interject and say, Jonathan, you're not done, because there's going to be some questions. And I know you didn't mean that literally.
Right.
In terms of presentation. I believe, are there next slides to pull Bob and Melissa into this?
Okay. I believe there are, and I will. Here we go. Is this one of them, or should I keep going?
You should keep going.
Keep going. Okay. All right. Just let me know when to stop.
Keep going. Okay, you can stop right
Here?
Yep.
All right.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Melissa, and I am from Milwaukee County. And I'm going to talk a little bit about our central staffing process that we have here in Milwaukee County. So the youth that come into our central staffing are repeat offenders. They're your high-risk kids. Majority of them have low protective factors. A lot of them come with trauma, and also a lot come with mental health. The most common diagnosis that we see in central staffing with our youth would be like ADHD, conduct disorder are probably the 2 biggest mental health diagnoses that we do see. So central staffing in Milwaukee County in the past used to be just our human service workers and supervisors, and then a wraparound Milwaukee representative. And then we moved into something a little bit different, where we wanted to really meet with the youth and the family and, you know, hear from them. So we moved into the process of meeting with the youth, the family, and any of the team members that were on working with that youth. But the one thing we kept focusing on was what the youth was doing wrong. The meeting was more on compliance, and a lot of people were quick to want to remove the youth from their home. And then recently, at the beginning of the year, during the pandemic, we have moved into this growth focus and incorporating that into our central staffing process. So we've been in this process, give or take, about 4 months now. And it's really a different way of thinking about the juvenile justice system and how we work with kids. When we do central staffing now, we make sure that it's strength-based, and the youth is creating their own plan. And they're able to own that plan by the time we get done with that meeting. And it appears from what we see that it's been a positive experience for the youth. We actually had one youth when we got done. The meetings are about an hour long. We had one youth say, I've never had a meeting like this before. And we were all kind of blown away by that when we first started this. So we knew something had to be working. I want to quickly talk about kind of how the central staffing process goes here in Milwaukee County, and then Bob will talk about what he's doing in his jurisdiction. But I'm going to go through phase one. So phase one is engaging the youth. So we really start with talking about the youth strengths. We let the youth talk about his or her strengths. Then I will ask the parent or the guardian, whoever is there on behalf of the youth, what they see as that young person's strengths are. And then we ask the worker and any other team members what they see are the strengths of that youth. Then the youth talks about where they see themselves in the future, or what do they see themselves doing. Then we go into phase two, which is assessing. We find out what barriers are blocking that youth from becoming whatever their ideal self is. And during that process, it's amazing what kids pull out on their own by what they say is getting in their way from reaching their ideal self. And when you think about that, they're really talking about their criminogenic needs of what they need to be working on and what they need to help with during that process. Then we move into phase three, which is planning and delivering, where youth at that time are developing their plan so that they're able to reach their ideal self. And at that time, we're also looping in the strengths that were talked about earlier in that meeting. And then the last phase is the monitoring. And that's just really looking at the progress and what the progress will look like for that youth moving forward. Now I would like to turn it over to Bob.
Thank you, Melissa, and thank you, Jonathan. Every time I hear you present on GFCM, I learn a little bit more and get more and more excited about the opportunities that presents to us as probation officers or as a court service unit working with kids on probation. Yeah, I would admit that there was a time in the past that probably many of us on this webcast would turn our nose up at ideas like this, like we did when we started first talking about the importance of family engagement or the use of assessment tools or incentives or evidence-based research terms, and it just was words. But this really brings home another approach that we can utilize to get kids to their ultimate goal, not just our ultimate goal, and moving forward. So we in Fairfax County are very excited about this framework and how we can implement it in addition to the work that we're doing around the usage of YAZI, focusing our work on protective factors and less on risk factors, and moving kids forward to their ultimate goals in life. We again want to approach this in support of our work around adolescent brain development, which has now become foundational in everything that we do. And Jonathan, you talked about that and the development of the brain and where the developing the identity plays into that, really focusing on that and really working with our kids to use this management system to move from just let me get through my 6 to 12 months probation to reaching some long-term positive outcomes. The other real advantage for us around growth-focused case management is it's another tool for our probation officers. We do a lot of assessments and screening now that says this is what we should do, but the next response from probation staff is, okay, that's great. How do you want me to do that? What are those tools that are available to me that can help us produce short and long-term, and that's what we're looking at here, is long-term outcomes for kids moving through the probation system, and really just getting away from solely focus on the conditions and compliance with probation, and really working with kids and families, because we can't forget the family part of this, to helping kids reach their greatest potential. And, you know, probably over the last half a decade, we've really started talking about the importance of developing relationships with kids, not just in a compliance relationship, but in a supportive, nurturing partnership with kids to get them moved to where they want to go. And these discussions around growth-focused case management force us to do that. And finally, and Jonathan, you talked on this a little bit, you know, we really work with our staff to talk about, when we get kids and families that we're working with, they are probably experiencing the lows of their life, and are hopeless and don't see the future, and really are hoping to get through the day. So we really want to work at, you know, how do we move by hopelessness and move into hopefulness, that there is something better at the end of the day, at the end of the term of probation, at the end of adolescence, and as they move into adulthood. And while we still focus on compliance, because we'll never get away with that, and our community demands that, and our stakeholders demand that, we certainly understand that there are better ways of gaining compliance and getting to the ultimate goal of not just simply completing a term of probation, but setting a plan and an action plan in place for kids moving forward when they're out of our system and moving forward. So we're really excited about this in Fairfax County, how we can implement it effectively in accordance with all the other evidence-based practices that we have put in place. So with that, I will move, I think, back to Jonathan and for the question and answer session.
Great. Thanks a lot for that. And I think John's going to be helping out a little bit with this, I think. But are you there?
Yes, sir, Jonathan.
Yes. Okay, good.
For all three of you, you can answer as you wish. We've got, man, the questions were coming in. Got them from all kinds of sources. I'm getting them on my own email. We're getting them in the chat box. I'm trying to the ones that were already in the pre-session. We're not going to have enough time. If I could make a comment before I offer this to you. I know that Jonathan's effort for you folks this afternoon was a deliberate effort to simplify the presentation within 90 minutes. There are obviously complexities because we're dealing with complex youth needs and complex youth and their families. Fortunately, the additional detail in practice, as Melissa spoke to, has been demonstrated within Milwaukee County and has had an impact. And there are many anecdotal tales that reflect the kind of impact that youth are having, even in their reaction to the workers asking them a question that they never thought a human service worker in Milwaukee DYFS would be asking them, that they might be concerned about. So I encourage you, as Jonathan has, to really try to understand the detail and continue to ask your questions of Jonathan, of us at the center, of the DYFS unit in Milwaukee as well. And I'd ask you this question before I start, and this is mostly for the audience. Folks, if it is best, now I have two sons, they're adult sons, but I look at this framework and I know that I try to apply this kind of thinking as I've tried to support my sons in their growth. And if it's best for my sons or your daughters, why isn't it what should be a part of what and how we are required to support every court-involved youth that we work with? Why not, is my question. Now for more of the questions coming from the audience, I'll start with really, I think, a fundamental that maybe some of us have, and Bob referenced some of the background of where some of us came from. This may have been a question I first asked, so I'm seizing a number of questions in the chat box. How is lack of compliance handled within this approach?
Fantastic. Yeah, fantastic. I absolutely love that. Had a number of great conversations around it. And I'll just give you, just so that I don't take up 20 minutes doing it, just give you the basic framework or the basic approach. Let's say, and this is the example I use in Milwaukee County. Youth has conditions, dabbled around with some drugs, and so the system's response is a 72-hour hold. All right, I am all for that. Absolutely, because I'm about accountability. Absolutely. The question is in the how. We're still going to impose 72-hour hold, right? Here is the non-growth way. and the control orientation way of imposing a 72-hour hold. You're going to be in detention for 72 hours because we caught you smoking pot. All right. So here's the control orientation approach. Caught you, you busted, right? You got to do detention, got to go do some time. And that's it. All right. So that's the punitive response, and you're being held accountable. I understand. Same actions. Now we shift. And this is the difficulty of the framework. It's got to change your thinking. Now, because I understand that the youth who just got caught smoking pot, right? I know he wants to be a crane operator one day. Now, that's the first point. So you're asking me, how do you handle compliance? I'm going to ask you, do you know your youth? It's critical. Because you cannot address complex issues like you got to do what you got to do here simply because I have the authority to do it. One of the slides I skipped that I want you to look at when you download it shows you the difference between authoritarian approaches and authoritative approaches. And the authoritarian approaches backfire. So because I know my youth wants to be a crane operator, I look at him, and now here's the approach. David, okay. You know that was wrong, right? Yeah. They know. They know. I'm not going to spend the time. Yeah. So look, I see the crane operator in you. I know where you want to go. And we got to pull you in for 72 hours and work with you on this one. Remember I shared that with you at the beginning? All right. Now we call it 72-hour hold, but your possibilities are so great, right? We cannot allow you to miss that, man. And we're going to bring you in, and we've really got to lock back in. You know, you got to revisit your ideal self. Maybe the first thing we'll do after the 72-hour hold is get you back over to the trade school, right? And talk to some folks about that, whatever. But we got to pull you in because now who you can become is in danger. That's how you deal with noncompliance. You got to take it back to who they want to become. It's more than just imposing, right, your authority. So no, keep your same actions. Every youth justice system in the country has them. You know what you hit them with. I am not advocating eliminating any of that. I'm just advocating when you do it this way. But make sure you do the upfront work so that you can. And the upfront work is you know them, you know who they want to become, you know where their strengths are. You've worked on some action steps and some action plans together, right? There is a plan in place that he or she was a part of developing. That's pretty darn important. Hey, we worked on this plan together. Now I can address the compliance, right? All too often, it's just a list of conditions and I'm surveilling you. And I think we end up tying our hands when we do it that way. So that's my my thought to you about it. By the way, my grandmother knew this, right? My grandmother knew this because she would look at me and she was when I got in trouble, and she would just look at me and say, "Boy, that is just not how a cloud behaves, right? That's not who we are, right?" She knew what I needed to do, but she connected me to, oh yeah, who I am, right? And where I want to go. And at the time I wanted to become a preacher one day, which I ended up not doing, but at least I had an ideal self I was after. And she goes, you ain't gonna become a preacher doing that, little young man. So as John said, don't we do this with our kids? Don't let the system overwhelm your humanity so that you're unable to look them in the eye and talk with them about who they are and who they want to become.
Thank you, Jonathan. And Dina, thanks for the question, among many others who asked this question. This approach, Jonathan would confirm by that statement, doesn't walk away from the research that confirms that the balanced approach of accountability through sanctions and incentives to change that behavior and redirect towards that positive identity. It's just as relevant in this approach as any other that is effectively implemented. Would you say, Jonathan?
Yes, bingo. Yes, thanks for that, John. Spot on. Spot on. Yeah.
I'm going to get Melissa back involved in this as well and just kind of cue in on a practical experience in DYFS. I happen to have a familiarity with how you guys have really nurtured and moved this approach forward and started to get the embrace and the commitment by your staff. But there's also other stakeholders in the youth justice system. Can you comment on where you are in the process of getting the other stakeholders to be partners with you in this approach? Melissa?
Sure, John. So currently, all of our stakeholders, like the DAs and the public defenders and the judges, are well aware of the growth focus. However, we haven't done any official like training or in-service on that yet, because we're really trying to make sure that our staff are well diverse and can talk the talk before they go into court and before we lay this out for our stakeholders, just so that when they start using the language in court, people will then understand what our staff are talking about. So we're on the right path.
Awesome, Melissa. It is part of the process. Bob, any comment on the stakeholders? Bring them along, because I know that you've done an excellent job in Fairfax. Just the importance of that, the training.
Yeah, certainly it's important about to train all the major stakeholders in the process, and that we're all using the same language. But we've also done a lot of work with our judges and our public defenders and our prosecutors and our police to let us do our job, which is we are the case managers, we are the experts in probation services, we are the experts in interventions, and let us identify through the usage of assessment and screening tools what the needs are, and then apply the appropriate evidence-based practices to do that. And once they understand that and they know that we are doing that type of work, they are much more appreciative of how we're approaching this.
Awesome, Bob. I have another question that's been asked with some redundancy. In fact, I'll give Rodney credit for hitting enter twice on the same question. So I'm definitely going to get your question in, Rodney. And that's, how do we get the parents to buy into this? So they're supporting the youth and then allowing you to explore the 3 additional steps. Maybe that's for you, Jonathan, first.
Yeah, it's great. I promise I won't take as long this time, because I know we are almost running out of time. A couple of things that we have been saying over and over again is that it's great to shift the family from sort of being an extension of the system. Their job is to help us surveil. The job is to help us make sure they do what they're supposed to do. Absolutely fine. But point number 1, it's critically important for family to know the youth's ideal self, to know who the youth wants to become. By the way, didn't our families know what we wanted to become? So now we had a family dynamics issue. It's just the basic real stuff. You might need to put in some family support services or whatever, functional family therapy. If there's some domestic violence issues, you got to knock those walls down. But the idea is we're all in this. And then secondly, at a very, very practical level, is they can be helpful and a part of the exploration and a part of the discovering. It's like Miss Adams. So what were some of his strengths when he was 7, 8, or 9? Because he wants to be a crane operator. I bet you saw some crane operator stuff in him a while back. It's just getting family, getting caretakers, understanding also where the youth wants to go, so that family itself is a part of the youth journey. The last thing I would say is think about the ideal self. Wonderful piece of research on the origins of youth's ideal selves, and they look at their parents or their caretakers. And so having some conversation around, so do you, Miss Johnson, what's your ideal self? What's your goal? I mean, my son is 34 years old, and I've shared my ideal self with him. But when he was 14, I was sharing who I wanted to become with him. And the research is saying that caretakers having this vision of what they want to do is also important. So that can be an entry point around how we work with families. And it's not just, you need to behave better or be a better parent, but who you want to become also sort of echoes with him. Tap into your behavioral health services and your counseling and mental health services in your community to possibly help with that kind of approach.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Yeah. John, can I take one quick 30 seconds, because I saw a question pop up and I know I addressed it, but obviously I didn't address it well. The question was, how do we use growth focused case management when our YAZI training teaches us to focus on criminogenic needs? And the answer is, because Milwaukee County has cracked it, you must focus on criminogenic needs, because those criminogenic needs are the barriers between who the youth is and who the youth can become. And so you still select some out, right? Zero in on them. And in Milwaukee County, that constitutes the short-term goal. Here are the criminogenic needs we're going to work on. And so you've got some antisocial thinking tendencies, right? And you don't consider consequences. Great. we got to work on those two criminogenic needs that you have in order for you to move towards being a crane operator one day. So I just want to stick that in there real quick, because I know that's an important question, and people don't see the connection immediately. This is by no means undermining or pushing aside the risk, needs, responsivity framework and any risk instruments that are out there. This is simply about using that in a developmental approach.
Jonathan, I'm glad you said that. It's obvious that we've worked together before. We should work together more in the future, because I had seen that question pop up.
Yes.
That was going to be my next question. I do want the audience to leave with that understanding. And if you don't explore it further, I think the big emphasis that you've made, Jonathan, is that this is, if you will, a yes and. This is not a disposal of risk needs. In fact, I said that in my opening. This is an integrated approach that can support the use of YASI or the YLS or the PACS or the OYAS or whatever you're using that are risk needs responsivity. I'm glad you grabbed that.
Yes.
Jonathan, if you will, I'm going to come back to you for one more, and then I want to get another question from Melissa before we wrap up. I've got 3 minutes left, so you guys got one question each coming at you.
Okay.
Jonathan, what's the evidence for the impact? For the properly pessimistic, what's the evidence for the impact of this approach, Jonathan?
You know, at this point, and I know we talked about this earlier, at this point, I would say that the impact, a couple of levels. I'll keep it short. There is some impact over on the youth worker side of things, in that now we're not just waiting for recidivism to occur. We're identifying markers of progress along the way. And therefore staff's a little bit more motivated, still taking some time for some others to come along. Please go to the practice brief. So I won't even jump into that. The last section of the practice brief that is in part of your handout talks about a evaluation that the quality assurance unit did up front during our pilot phase, which is now about 2 or 3 years ago, and identified some very, very specific things, and saw that some risk levels were dropping in the pilot group. That is the group that got this approach versus groups prior to that didn't get this approach. So I just point you to the practice brief. The last section gives you some of that information as well. And the last thing that I would say is that we have designed and developed what we are identifying as the markers of desistance, 4 categories and specific indicators in those categories that they're now starting to roll out, so that we're able to answer that question a year or 2 years from now with great specificity. They're going to be tracking indicators that a youth is actually growing. Don't have the time to get into those, but the research has given them to us, so we are moving in that direction. We've seen enough proof of concept to say that we can now move to a more formal evaluation and investing time, energy, and resources into tracking youth for a period of time to see if they are in fact growing out of offending.
Jonathan, thank you. And Melissa, I tried to forewarn you. This could be all 3 of you, because you all experienced the reality of the work. We're working in Minneapolis and Seattle right now, very challenging environments. Milwaukee is no less affected at this point. But are there any early lessons learned in regard to the growth-focused approach for our work with minority youth?
You know what? Let me touch on that. I'm going to make this really short. Look, I love this, because forming an identity, as you saw, requires you got to explore for a while, and then you got to commit to something. Just on the level of exploration, if you are in a minority community and an underserved community, your options for exploration are greatly limited. I've talked to folks who've said, you know, why don't these youth have some aspirations, what they want to become? You know, because they didn't get the experiences that my son got for this exploration. We know that a block to exploration is discrimination. We know that. We know there are systems barriers to what you can join, cost prohibitive, where a county or city places its resources for after-school programming. All of those things are exploration opportunities that opens windows to what one day I might commit to, what one day I might discover about myself. If I'm limited, right, and I don't feel safe, and I'm discriminated against, right, then you lessen how much I explore and how much I can discover about myself. This goes a lot deeper than that, but I just want to put that piece out there just as something for you to sort of put a pin in to think about when it comes to our youth of color.
Thank you, Jonathan. Melissa, you want to comment on that at all?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have the disparities here in Milwaukee County. And I think what our staff are incredible at doing is kind of breaking down those walls and looking for whatever they can find that youth has interest in, to try to get that youth to be able to grow. So sometimes it's looking outside that youth community, or maybe even looking in a different county, depending on where that youth sees him or herself in the future. So it is definitely a barrier, and it is something that we are working very hard at in Milwaukee to make it better.
Melissa, thanks. And to everyone, if these communities of color, and almost I can take out the gift, if these communities of color experience the limitations and the challenges, then it's incumbent upon us to use this approach to explore even harder, even deeper, to find those opportunities for minority youth in their communities, or as Melissa said, in other communities where they might benefit from the opportunity to dream or to realize a future as if they were our own children. And we're running out of time. We need a little bit of a close from our hosts at NTTAC. So I just want to say an incredible thank you to our presenters, Jonathan Cloud, Bob Birmingham, Melissa Graham, not just for today, but all the work that they do on behalf of the youth. I want to thank everybody in the audience for your incredible interest and the numbers that have stuck with us through this entire webinar. I encourage you to follow up, ask more questions, learn more about this. And then, as I said at the outset, maybe take some of this knowledge into a team meeting in your own jurisdiction and see how could we apply this so that our youth realize these opportunities in the future. Thank you, everyone. Alyssa, I think I'm giving it back to
Allison. Thank you so much, John. I appreciate it. And I put a poll up for everyone, just asking how you plan to apply the information today. So while we're closing up, if you could take that poll, that would be great. And you should also feel free to download the files. And there's also a link in the chat that will take you to the Google Drive, and the files are there as well. So within 24 hours, you'll receive an automated email from NTTAC with a certificate of attendance. So please keep an eye on your email for that. And then if you have any questions, you want to contact us at all, our website is on the screen. We also have a listserv you can sign up for, where you'll get some information about upcoming events and resources. And you can also like us on our Facebook page. We also have a help desk. So if you have any questions, concerns, if you want any the transcript or anything from today, you can call us or email us on the help desk. And we also have, of course, the email, the website for OJJDP. And OJJDP also has a GFCM listserv, which is how you can get information on all kinds of upcoming events. So sign up, please sign up for that. And they have a website as well, you can see, for events there. So there's lots of places for you to find out what's going on in the juvenile justice and delinquency prevention world. And if you need any training or technical assistance, you can submit a request for help via OJJDP's TTA 360 platform. You can create an account and then submit a request, and we'll be happy to farm that out to an organization that can help you. And this webinar, as a reminder, this webinar was recorded, and it will be available on OJJDP's multimedia page, as well as OJJDP's YouTube channel. You can also view past webinars through their multimedia page or YouTube channel as well. And if you need any supporting materials, you can contact us at the TTA Help Desk. We do have a couple of upcoming events. So the Innocent Justice Foundation has part 5 and 6 of their wellness program implementation series. The first, part 5 is about peer support, and part 6 is about assessment. So we'd love to see you there as always. And you can connect with us in many ways, on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, on the website. So there's a lot of different ways that you can connect with us, and we'd love to see you there. And this product is supported by grant number 218 CZBXK002. and it's by the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. And the opinions, findings, inclusions, or recommendations expressed are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect those of the Department of Justice. And that's it. Thank you so much for coming. We appreciate all of your questions. And of course, we really appreciate the panelists for giving us so much of their wisdom today. So thank you so much, and take care.